5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
A confirmed attack is taking place against the United States. Aliens from an unknown location have been reported in multiple states.
We are controlling transmission.
There is another world that awaits, far beyond what we can see and feel. A place that's anything but ordinary.
What you believe might not be. Step into the zone of the vast unknown. UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, conspiracies and cover-ups. And to the paranormal we go with Jeremy Scott.
It's the Parabnormal Moments of 2025.
Tomorrow announcing and giving all of the Kennedy files. So people have been waiting for decades for this.
In order to put to bed some of the theories that have been out there on John F. Kennedy, we have to know the full truth, and the full truth starts with transparency, and that's why these files are so important for the American people to read for themselves. In previous investigations, they didn't have access to the information that we are going to have access to. And so that's a big deal, especially if you're looking at what truly happened with JFK.
It's many pages. Is it 80,000 pages? Approximately 80,000 pages. So it's a lot of stuff. And you'll make your own determination.
Here's Jefferson Morley.
This story is bedeviled by, on the one hand, false statements from the government, bad faith evidence, manipulation of the facts for self-serving means. And then on the other hand, because the government is not credible, people who want an explanation go crazy and develop all kinds of conspiracy theories, to try and solve what the government can't solve for them or what the government isn't credible about. And so in between those two things, if you're trying to find the firm ground of so what actually happened, how can I be sure? It's very difficult because those are like two storms on either side of you, that can, sweep you up and confuse you and engulf you. So that's a challenge when dealing with the JFK story. It always has been, and is now. The thing that's promising about this moment is, in that situation, one thing that is reassuring is transparency, right? We're not hiding anything, okay? And this was the great benefit of the JFK Records Act back in 1992. The Congress, in response to indignation and furor over Stone's movie, JFK, said, we're not going to reinvestigate the crime, but we are going to make all of the government's records on the subject available. That's a good idea. That's just good, transparent government. People see everything and then they can decide what they want. So the JFK Records Act created the Assassination Records Review Board. And this was a small federal agency backed by this law. And they went to all the federal agencies and said, give us your assassination-related records. Now, at places like the Secret Service and the CIA, they said, get lost. And they held up the law and they said, no, this is a law. You got to provide them. And over the course of 4 years, they actually did a good job and got records out of these hands of these agencies. But that independent structure was key. You had people outside the CIA who would decide, is this document going to be made public? Because if it's somebody inside the CIA, forget it. They're never going to make it public, right? So that was how we actually came for the first time, thanks to my friend Oliver Stone, we started to get something resembling the full historical record of JFK's assassination. That is to say, all the records of the law enforcement, the investigations, the testimony of the witnesses, anything that was relevant was all put in one place. The JFK Records Collection, which was held at the Archives 2 facility in College Park, Maryland. It's right here outside of Washington. So that's the thing that people are talking about, the JFK records collection. It's a body of records, huge pile of paper, 320,000 documents, 3-4 million pages of material that's all supposed to be made public. But it hasn't been made public. And it hasn't been made public under these curious circumstances. The law, the JFK Records Act, was quite explicit. That was passed in October 1992. And it said all government records related to the assassination have the presumption of immediate release. Okay? So with that kind of government blessing, that kind of law, there was this imperative. These things should be made public. And the law said, it gave room to CIA and other federal agencies. It said, look, if you don't want to release this because of national security or personal privacy or whatever, you can request a postponement. And the board did that. They postponed things. The CIA said, this guy's still alive. He doesn't want his name out there. Okay, we don't release his name. But the law said, after 25 years, everything becomes public. So 25 years after October 1992 is October 2017. Donald Trump has been elected president. And the question comes to him, are all the JFK files going to be released? So Trump does what Trump does. He tweets and says, all the JFK files have been released ahead of time, which was a fine sentiment. But the truth was all the JFK records were not released. And the ones that were released behind schedule. So what Trump did was he basically agreed to the demands of the CIA and the FBI to keep a lot of material secret. 15,000 different documents with redactions at that point. And Trump kicked the can down the road. He basically said, they can keep this stuff secret and 4 years from now, we'll revisit it. So 4 years from October 2017, now we're October 2021, and Joe Biden is president. And the question comes to him. And he does the same thing Trump does. He agrees to whatever the CIA and the FBI want. They say, we don't want to release these things. We'll give you some other things. And so, like Trump, Biden releases some records and he lets the CIA keep some records back. So 8 years after the statutory deadline, we find ourselves, there's still 3,500 documents that are still at least have one word or one sentence or one paragraph or one page or many pages redacted 8 years after the statutory deadline. Okay. So, people started complaining about this. And we talked about this on my JFK Facts blog, JFK Facts newsletter on Substack. And we pointed out, what is going on? The law is pretty clear. Why is this stuff still public? And we made a fuss about it, and kind of embarrassed Trump because we pointed out that his tweet was false and there was really no disputing it. Well, friends of Trump, Tucker Carlson, Andrew Napolitano, these guys started giving him a hard time and saying, why didn't you do that? And if you listen to these interviews, Trump rarely is at a loss for words. But when he's challenged on this subject, he just didn't want to answer. He was embarrassed. You could tell. He doesn't embarrass easily, but he was not comfortable when his friends were saying, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? And he would mutter this excuse and that excuse. Well, anyway, when the 2024 campaign rolled around, there was Robert Kennedy, who first ran as a Democrat and then ran as an independent and then went over to Trump. And Robert Kennedy always made an issue about his uncle's murder. And he said, I believe the CIA was involved. Very frank about that. And he didn't make it a major issue of his campaign, but kind of a minor issue. He started a campaign for full disclosure of JFK records. So this was something he cared about personally. And you can understand that. His father had been killed. His uncle had been killed. So, of course he had strong feelings. So when RFK went over to Trump, in August in Arizona, and they meet on the stage and it's very exciting, and Trump says, and we're going to release all of the JFK files.
The Paranormal Moments of 2025.
Into the paranormal.
underground structure that's supposedly underneath the Egyptian pyramids.
A team of researchers came across what appears to be a massive structure underneath the Giza pyramid, and this structure would extend 2 kilometers deep.
Italian and Scottish researchers conducted advanced high-frequency radar mapping under Egypt's famous pyramids. They claim to have discovered wells, caverns, and shafts that are more than 2,000 feet underground.
What this study did was apply SAR techniques to the pyramids to find structures within them, and in the process, it claims to have found some sort of a network beneath them.
How could something this enormous stay hidden for thousands of years? And what would it mean for everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt if this turned out to be true?
The Paranormal Moments of 2025 tonight. Here's my conversation with Robert Stanley.
Any of us in this audience who have taken a seashell that has chambers in it, like a nautilus or something, like a conch shell? If you hold it up to your ear, you'll hear what some people say. It sounds like the ocean. Obviously, it's not. But what that is your ear is actually hearing frequency vibrating in the chambers, resonating in the chambers of the shell. So what the synthetic aperture radar is actually setting a beam down that is then picking up the sensitive. It's so sensitive. It's just all it has to do is touch the surface. And then it registers these micro frequencies of resonance underneath the ground. So it doesn't have to penetrate hundreds of feet or whatever, 2 kilometers or whatever they're claiming. But they're picking up signatures. Now, they've been using that kind of system, similar systems, to find voids in the pyramid, under the plateau, and for sure we know it works. But it's, as far as accessing some of these things, it's very difficult. Like I said, the Tomb of Osiris has already been opened. That was a few years ago. But I don't think they found any remains. This particular clip I'm going to read to you here, I'm not sure exactly what year it is, because I put so much information in these reports, I kind of get lost of which article it came from. But I think this guy's name is Colin Wilson, but he said, obviously, Egypt has had an intriguing political past in the battle between East and West. Interestingly, during the writing of this article, one source contacted me claiming that frequently the SCA, and I think that's an archaeological group in Egypt, receives from the U.S. National Security Agency satellite imagery containing information as to whether or not there may be subterranean structures at certain sites in Egypt. So, if it works for the NSA, I imagine it could work for these teams over in Europe, because NASA uses the synthetic aperture radar as well, and they have found all kinds of things that are typically not seen by the regular satellite. You know, the satellite imagery is different. So even NOAA, the National Oceanographic Institute, they use beam satellites to map the oceans. Those, you know, like on Google Earth, when you go to the ocean, yeah, a lot of that stuff is actually from space. So there's a way to do it. Obviously, the beams don't penetrate all the way to the water. So we're talking about a level of technology most people don't even know how it works, is all I'm saying. So I realize people are upset. They're trying to make arguments against it. And the people that are screaming the loudest are the Egyptologists, as usual, because they don't want to lose their positions of authority and basically have all their historical narratives destroyed.
So it's possible that this discovery, with the method that they're reporting, is actually feasible.
Yeah, but okay, look, a lot of people, especially with artificial intelligence now, they just plug it in and they say, you know, give me a rendering of this thing, and it pops it out. And you see it everywhere right now. It's a lot of clickbait, in my opinion. And so people are confused. They really don't know what to believe.
All right. So do you think that the evidence is strong one way or another?
Yes, it does. Yes, because historically, as I said, there's an incredible amount of evidence that are, documented evidence that other people have actually been there in the past to this place underground. It's not called the halls of Amenti. My understanding is that that's in another dimension if it exists at all. But this complex under the Giza plateau, I guess parts of it could be natural because there is an aquifer there. So, it would rot, like the Nile would flood seasonally. I think it still does, but obviously that limestone is rather porous. And I think I read recently too that the Sphinx actually has to have water pumped out of that area on a regular basis. I mean, it's actually accumulatively a lot of water. So where's that coming from?
Right. So if there was a city beneath the pyramids, I mean, safe to say it probably doesn't exist in the form that it is civilized today. So if it was civilized in the past, do we know exactly when that may have been? And then, of course, the second part of that is how would it have met its demise?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, a lot of good questions. I really have no idea. There's no way to validate, first of all, that it does exist. Second of all, how old is it? And obviously, it did meet its demise at some point. Otherwise, you would think that we would have found it by now, or whoever was living there would have let us know that they're there. Unless that they were hiding. Like, I mean, most of the underground bases / cities that the U.S. government built back in the 50s, 60s, etc. Most people don't know where those are, and they certainly don't know how to access them. And if you did, you'd probably get arrested or worse. So there's a lot going on underground. Are you familiar with the underground cities in Turkey?
I've heard about some of them, actually, yes.
Okay, so if I read this correctly, some of those cities could house up to 30,000 people. And the tunnel systems that connected these various cities underground, like some of them were 10 stories deep, if I remember correctly. It's mind-boggling, okay? Whoever did that, first question, how did they see? You really think they're running around with torches in the dark all that time? For something that deep? I mean, yes, they had ventilation systems, but maybe they had candles? That would take a lot of candles for 30,000 people to be living underground with water supplies and stuff, food stores. It boggles my mind. And here's the other thing. It was only accidentally rediscovered back in the 60s. Somebody was doing construction or whatever, and they knocked something through the wall, and next thing you know, they're like, wait a second, there's a whole city underneath this area. And it turned out there was quite a few of them. And most of them are actually yet to be fully excavated. If that gives you any idea of what we're dealing with here, it's not just Egypt, although that is fascinating. And I got to ask, have you ever been there?
No, absolutely. Never been out of the country, actually.
Okay, well, I wouldn't recommend it, but I went there when I was 15. I was there for a few days. And it was... the worst poverty I'd ever seen in my life. I'd already been to like 50-something countries at that point, but it was also it was the dirtiest place I've ever been to in my life. It just and strange. Just otherworldly, to put it mildly. Like they build whole cities for the dead. Now they do that now, and I'm like. I said, why? And the guy said, because that's what we do. I'm like, yeah, all right. I also went to the Cairo Museum and I saw a mummy up close that had been unwrapped and everything. And that was very strange in my young mind. What is that for? So more questions than answers. I did get to spend some time in the Great Pyramid. My parents and my sister didn't want to go. For reasons I still don't understand. But all I know is when I came out, they're like, you were in there for a long time. What were you doing?
Stay tuned for more paranormal moments on Into the Paranormal.
This is Paranormal News. A newly disclosed group within the FBI has secretly been tracking and investigating UFOs, according to a handful of sources. While the agency is not commenting on personal matters or the revelation of what the working group may have found, the FBI has stated that they investigate unidentified anomalous phenomena when there's a potential violation of federal law or threats to national security. Ryan Graves, executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace and a former Navy pilot, says his organization has been collaborating with the working group to provide them with leads. He says the program consists of a manager and over a dozen agents nationwide who are assigned to track down UAP cases. It's unknown, though, how long it's been in existence or how much money has been spent. I'm George Henry, Parabnormal News.
Scientists are trying to figure out a decades-long mystery, the source of a strange radio signal that's coming from below the ice in Antarctica.
There is really not even the first shred of a clue the scientists have about where these radio waves are coming from, other than beneath the ice.
This comes after a series of other bizarre discoveries in Antarctica over the course of literally decades.
Some defy known physics, hinting at possible alien origins or unknown particles interacting deep within Earth's frozen depths.
There's something coming from down there, from down there, and from down there.
The Paranormal Moments of 2025. Brad Olson.
Yeah, I went down there 6.5 years ago. So it would have been January, February 2019. Little did we know that what was going to happen at the end of 2019 out of Wuhan, China. But it was quite a harrowing trip crossing the Drake Passage on a sailboat. Almost all of us on the ship got violently ill with seasick, including myself. And I was thrown up for about 3 days. I think I lost 25 pounds on that trip, Jeremy.
Wow.
So it was by far the hardest travel I've ever taken.
And then tell us about once you get there. What was it like? Because did you have to prepare for those conditions in any special way?
Well, we prepared for the cold. We prepared for sailing. But when you're on very, very rough seas, including the Drake Passage is regarded the roughest ocean in the world, the Southern Ocean, that you really can't do a whole lot. We took some Dramamine, but took it too late. So we got seasick quite badly. And we were required to go up on deck every 8 hours. You get a break, and then they want you to go up for 4 hours to do watch. But if you're heaving up your guts and you can't feel like you can leave your cot, then you can't do it. But when I did, I got up there and just saw those waves that our boat was just riding right over. And every time we went down into a trough, I'm looking up and it's about 3 stories tall. I'm thinking, oh, we are so screwed. But the boat just managed to ride the waves. We did get struck by a rogue wave, and it almost threw one of our team members off the boat, but he was connected with a harness. So probably saved his life. And we had some damage to the boat as well. It was quite a harrowing journey is all I can say. But once we got down there, it was smooth sailing because we stayed in the Bransford Strait, it's called. It's between the islands off of the Palmer Peninsula, mainland Antarctica, and several islands, which made it much calmer seas. Then when we sailed back, 15 full days in Antarctica, took our Dramamine on time, and by then we were already pretty well acquainted to the rocking and rolling of the ship and did not get seasick on the way back.
So the way back was easier than the way down. Yeah. And what were those days like? I mean, what time of year were you there?
Well, you really only want to go during the summer season, which is, of course, opposite of ours. So it was January, February 2019.
And so you're not experiencing the extreme cold and dry and that sort of thing?
It's not only that, but the ice pack extends halfway to South America. So you really couldn't even get there, at least not safely in the kind of ship we were in. You can really only go to Antarctica between mid-November and early March. That's really the tourist season.
Interesting. So what did you observe when you were there?
Well, once we got to King George Island, there was a base called Arktowski that we dropped anchor and went ashore on the dinghy. This was a Polish base, and there were 11 Polish people on our trip and 3 Americans, and we were welcomed in. We brought them fresh fruit and vegetables, which they're very happy about, and we were allowed to take showers, which I can't tell you how good that felt after what we'd been through. Had some 2 meals with them and had some drinks and played music with them. It was really fun evening, and the trip started to become quite enjoyable at that point. But what we did mainly was every day take the sailboat to a different location and explore around, either jumping on the Zodiac and going ashore and checking out penguin colonies or seals and other wildlife, or just seeing the beautiful sights down there and going to different bases. We went to, in total, 6 different bases, and every one of those bases I went to, Jeremy, as far as I know, I'm the only researcher in this field that went down there with the specific purpose in mind, and that is to ask questions and try to find out some of these mysteries that we've heard of in Antarctica. So my line of questioning was, did you hear of these 3 major mother ships that are down there? And if so, could you pinpoint them? The answer was always no. Do you know about any antediluvian civilizations down there, such as the pyramids supposedly poking through the ice, or any other megalithic ancient architecture? Answer was always no. How about UFO sightings or aliens? Only one time we got an affirmation that another Argentinian base called the Belgrano 2 had a UFO sighting a few weeks before we were there. And they were actually very reluctant to tell us. So that's kind of how I feel it was a true sighting. And apart from that, all I found out was that there was a no-fly zone over the South Pole region, right about where the hole in the ice is supposed to be, and other no-go zones in Antarctica. And that's kind of interesting, Jeremy, because per the Antarctica Treaty, the whole continent is supposed to be open to science and even tourism.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting to find out that there were actually places you're not allowed to go.
So did you observe anything strange when you were there?
Well, we went to Deception Island. Interesting name. And we went into the bay and we spent a night there, and then we went ashore to explore an old whaling colony of the Norwegians from the 19th century. And everything in wood is perfectly preserved there because it's so cold, and very little animal or viruses can survive down there. Everything is preserved. But Deception Island is a volcanic caldera, and it had erupted some years before and wiped out this parts of this whaling village we went to. But I bring up Deception Island because it is a location where there have been many UFO sightings.
More paranormal moments of 2025 coming up on Into the Paranormal.
Malaysian 370, Lampu radar, good morning. Climb flight level 250.
Morning, level 250, Malaysian 370.
The world needs to know what happened to MH370. How does a Boeing 777 disappear? And could this happen again?
The Boeing 777 disappeared with 239 people on board en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing in March 2014.
Conspiracy theorists believe they know what happened, even where the missing plane is.
The Malaysia MH370 footage is real. It gets zapped out of existence. It gets wormholed.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Ashton Forbes on the Paranormal Moments of 2025.
So I came upon them like many others did in August of 2023 on the social media site Reddit on the subreddit UFOs. I believe it was August 7th that they were posted and got a lot of chatter. One of the first things we noticed, they had been posted previously in January of the same year of 2023, but didn't get like almost any attention. And a lot of the comments were, this is terrible, this hurts the families, weird stuff, which now looks like bot comments. And for about 12 days, maybe a little bit longer, actually. Yeah, 12 days. That was basically the only thing the entire subreddit discussed. Every single thread was either people trying to find more evidence about what we were seeing in the videos or people trying to debunk the videos. There's never been any videos that have ever drawn before or since that amount of attention on Reddit. For me, when I got, let's say, activist about it, I'm somebody I'm a healthcare IT guy for 20 years. And I got interested in the UFO phenomenon when like the Tic Tac Navy videos, the New York Times article came out in 2017. And I started to think there might be something to this. So I started paying attention, but I've never had a social media presence or anything before this. And when I saw the evidence that the mouse cursor in what we now know is Gorgon stare whammy footage, when I saw the mouse cursor scrolling over the video, when the video in the background was playing at a different frame rate than what the mouse cursor was working at, I knew we were looking at a screen recording, an actual screen recording. Whether or not it was fake or real, it was a screen recording is what we were looking at. And that was an incredible detail, especially because that detail implied that we were looking at a remote terminal session. And what I mean by that is that my normal job is a database consultant. So when you work at like a hospital, for example, when I'm logged into a system, it's actually connected to a database somewhere else. It can be on the other side of the planet or the other side of the country in a database server somewhere. And usually those database servers are guarded by people with guns. And when that happens, there's this connection that you do from the terminal that you're logged into to the actual database. And that's what this was implying, some type of system like that, which would imply its authenticity, especially because I knew the government used stuff like that. I've done contract work through healthcare for the government. And the evidence only began to pile on after that. I started this organization, started digging into it, digging into the missing plane, immediately found out there's definitely a cover-up, found out they had been hiding a huge amount of evidence. I found out that a bunch of evidence that if you just pull it in tells a completely different story about what happened to the plane. And then find out recently in the last week that the one video is not a satellite video at all, even though it's called satellite video. It's something called Gorgon stare wide area motion imagery. That's why it looks so weird. That's why the clouds in some cases don't look like they're moving very much, because it's actually like 3D Google Earth video playback, also real time. And they do this like anti-parallax type thing to it so that you can like interactively track objects on it. And so since then, now, obviously, we've been able to identify who the company is that makes that system. We now know that this is definitely a covert operation that we're seeing in the videos that's being conducted against the plane. And so, we can kind of take it from there. That's where this is at the moment.
So this system that you refer to, for those who aren't familiar, was this developed by the Air Force?
Yeah. So Gorgon Stare was developed by the Air Force and a company called Sierra Nevada Corporation. Just in the last week, I've realized Sierra Nevada Corporation is basically the Lockheed Martin of illegal spy surveillance. And this Gorgon Stare thing that we're looking at has never been publicly revealed ever. They stopped even giving updates around the time that these videos leaked. And I've been told now, behind the scenes at least, that it may even be obsolete. They may even have better stuff than this. But what they were doing is they were flying drones above anywhere they want, and it would give a 100 square kilometer view. And what it was doing is just taking hundreds of pictures at once, essentially, and then stitching them together using this software. So that creates this seamless interactive map. And then you can click on points and it would pop up a window, and it pops up a zoomed in window, and then you can move that window around to track the object you want on the bigger field of view that you can see behind you. And that's exactly what we're looking at in the video. Someone's recording one of those windows as they're tracking the plane while it's flying low, very low, and there's a drone above it, and they're tracking this plane. And then the question everybody asks is, well, why are they tracking it? And why is there a second video of another drone horizontal to the plane? Because the whole thing was an operation by the CIA, something called the Special Activities Center, which is some thing for the CIA where they take JSOC, the Special Forces people like Delta Force, SEAL Team 6. They take the special of those people. They get something called a green door assignment, which is like if you go through the green door, you can like never talk about that mission that you went on, like ever. And so they go on these types of missions. And so like the camera operator presumably is somebody that's like a special forces person that would never talk ever in a million years about what happened. And how the videos got on the internet is that somebody else accessed them, because none of those people are ever none of the people on those operations would ever leak it. They would never take a chance of even putting someone on an operation that would even have a remote chance of leaking footage like that. So what happened was the Gorgon Stare footage and apparently the drone footage must have got put somewhere on a shared network where other military had access to it. In this case, a guy named Edward Lynn from the Navy. He was in a special secret spy plane program called the VPU-2 Wizards. And so he probably was high ranked enough, and we looked his history up, and he would have been, to accidentally have seen this footage. And then he might have freaked out because it's so foreign when you look at it. Everybody thinks it's aliens at first, but it's actually not. It's human technology. That he probably thought it was aliens, and he leaked it or showed somebody it, and they got it on the internet. And so ultimately the responsibility fell back on Edward Lynn for those videos being on the internet. And he was lucky that nobody until 10 years later realized that those videos were real, because they probably would have killed him if people had realized that it was real. But because nobody realized it was real, and because he probably wasn't intentionally trying to leak the footage, he probably just didn't know what was going on, he only got 9 years. 9 years. So, and the Edward Lynn case, we don't have time to go all into it, but he triggered a national security alert at the highest levels. They tried to get him with espionage and had to admit there was no evidence of espionage. They were terrified that what he was going to leak was going to, that he would say something like in the trial about what he leaked. So they had him in pretrial detainment. They made him take a plea deal because they were afraid the case would go to trial because they were afraid they'd have to show the evidence. His lawyer said the evidence in question is available on the internet, and he got caught with flight manifests that included search and rescue code names, meaning the reason why he saw the videos, he was on the rescue operation, the search and rescue operation for the Navy afterwards, and he accessed the video to probably help look for the plane, and he saw that and went, holy shit, I just found out what happened to the plane.
Edward Lynn, the individual member of the Air Force, right, Ashton, who brought these forward, leaked them?
No, he's Navy. Yeah,
right.
And people wondering, Ashton, how do you know Edward Lynn is the guy that did it? Well, I just gave you the evidence. And in addition to that, 2 months after I started naming him, which was about October of 2023, the end of December of 2023, he files for an official name change. So instead of suing me, instead of reaching out to me, instead of having his lawyer send a message to me saying, I'm not the guy, don't say my name, you're defaming me, he legally changes his name and goes into hiding. I've literally been trying to reach him for 2 years. And recently, we found a video on YouTube of his new name. That's how we found out about his name change. And there he is. I actually couldn't even believe that he would be bold enough to put his face on a YouTube video. And he was using old pictures from the Navy from like media stuff. And he was using his new name. And so, of course, I reached out to the company, tried to reach out to him, again, no response. Somebody finally gets in touch with his lawyer. And his lawyer says that the feds brought, quote unquote, satellite video into the case, and that he knew exactly what the person was talking about when they brought it up. But we didn't end up getting the context of what they meant. And then when I tried to get in touch with the lawyer, because I found his phone number from the person or whatever, won't talk to me, won't pick up the phone, won't return a voicemail, won't return a call. And now he's turned off his phone. Phones now been, just go straight to voicemail for the last several weeks. So, I mean, he's got to be the guy. Absolutely has to be the guy. And it fits the story of what his case is and what happened with the leaks of those videos. Because for people that think those videos are fake, first thing I want to tell you, think about this. How did the hoaxer know that we would never find the plane? At any moment while they were making these elaborate military prank hoax videos that are one's in thermal FLIR and one's in infrared. They're both at nighttime. At any moment, we could have just found the massive Boeing 777 that the debris field should have been visible from space. We could have found it at any moment blowing up the hoax. And yet somehow the hoaxer knew we would never find the plane. Otherwise that hoax would fall apart. So what I'm saying is that there is no possible way in hell that the videos are fake. No chance, not even a slight chance that the videos are fake.
Thanks for joining us on the Paranormal Moments of 2025. Into the Paranormal.
Paranormal News, I'm George Henry. Video of a U.S. military encounter with a UFO made headlines at this week's congressional hearing when Congressman Eric Burleson played a clip before the task force that he says was obtained from an anonymous whistleblower.
This was taken October 30th of 2024. This video is of an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb, or this object, off the coast of Yemen. You'll see that another MQ-9 launched a Hellfire missile.
Instead of imploding the object, the missile appears to bounce off of it, and masses of debris appear to break away from the object. The 3 military witnesses who testified at the hearing were asked about the video.
Does this video scare you guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
Wiggins?
Yes. Yes.
The witnesses also testified that no U.S. technology is capable of surviving such an attack. Hear paranormal news every hour on Into the Paranormal.
There's a parallel universe, a veil that separates us from all we perceive. True reality. Open the gate, let the truth be known. It's more than meets the eye. We're not alone. Into the paranormal. Into the paranormal. Into the paranormal. Crossover.
In recent months, Congress has also been presented with evidence that points to technologies that, to our knowledge, are beyond our current capabilities.
These unknown technologies that come supposedly from elsewhere.
We have got technology that's better than George Lucas, better than anything you've seen in Star Wars and Star Trek, whatever. And it's kept absolutely secret.
We already have the means to travel among the stars. But these technologies are locked up in Black Project. And it would take an act of God to ever get them out for the benefit of humanity.
These are the Paranormal Moments of 2025. Retired U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant Gene Sticco.
You know, one gentleman looked at it. He recognized the engine component as being thermonuclear, but again, without sort of the whole translation and things like that, it, you know, was really no more than guesswork. So what we decided to do eventually, another friend, Mario Fiallo, who's credited as a co-author, does a lot of work building AI language models and things like that. And so we began using, you know, probably about a year and a half ago, using AI to help us translate it. And that's where we really came down to the process. So we said, okay, we can use AI to translate the text. Natalia can look at it linguistically and verify it to an extent that way. We would run it through alternate models as well to test the translations. And then we began compiling it that way. In the meantime, as you mentioned in the introduction, I really started looking at it from a forensic standpoint. So what do we know about the man? What do we know about the time frames? There's things in the book that talk about 2024 and 2020 and going into 2026. So I started breaking all of that down as methodically and systematically as possible to say, okay, these look like they were written through the early 90s because they are typewritten. They are typewritten with handwriting. So obviously a computer wasn't involved in creating them. So that sort of gives us a mid-90s time frame. We have all of the politics and geopolitics of the collapse of the Soviet Union. We have what he could have known during that period when it comes to some of the physics theories that he talks about, some of the theories he challenges. And then we have, obviously, his death in 2019 and advancements in science that have happened since then. And so I begin, in order to validate, in as much as a layman can, validate physics, asking those questions, what did he know then? What do we see now in the scientific community? And then taking a step back to the sort of intel side of it, researching what did official Soviet documentation look like? The papers themselves, some of them are different colored papers. Some of them you can see remnants of paper clips. You can see the staining of, probably smoke-filled rooms. Some of the papers are carbon copies. So they're not the originals, which would say the original has, gone off to somewhere else. So piecing all of that together and trying to put together a forensic profile of the body of work as we had it, the man as we knew him, and filling in the blanks, along with what we could assess as the science as it developed, continues us, on that path and continued us, led us to those conclusions, I should say, that this really is an authentic body of work. The language that he uses throughout it is not theoretical. So if anyone's into psycholinguistics and all of that, he's not talking in terms of I think and maybe. He's talking in terms of specific observations. He mentions at one point, finding plasma. The calculations, again, are specific and direct. So that was part of the work. And then some of the side work I've been doing during that period and since is looking at what publicly available data, was available about USSR era reported crashes, reported recoveries, and making, various comparisons against that, along with ultimately looking at patents that have been filed by the Russians, the Chinese, and the U.S., and comparing them against the craft in the book. And all of those comparisons indicate that what we have in the book is actually missing links to what are even in the patents. And so what that's, says to me is, in a sense, Russia, this is probably part of what was a larger body of work that has led to recent developments in, Russian weapon systems and space, and again, these public patents that we can find. And if they had it, then similarly, I would imagine the U.S. has it. And if they don't have it, then they're, we're seriously behind the ball on a national security impact. But trying to get this to the attention of people has been very difficult. And, as you've seen in releasing it, it's not a sexy book at all. It's very straightforward in so much as we said, let's not interject opinion into it or our ideas. Let's give a translation and basically invite the scientific community to do the math.
Okay, so what do we actually know about the UFO?
Well, I mean, what do we know about its origin? I know nothing
about
the
size,
craft.
That sort of thing, where it crashed.
So the specifications It's about a 30-meter in diameter object. What really struck me was it weighs something, in the realm of 6 million pounds. So for the size, it's extraordinarily heavy. I think when I sort of ran numbers, it came up with, it's the size of, or the weight at least of 16, fully loaded 747s, which is, sort of mind-boggling. But one of the interesting things, we finally found, sort of through a mutual friend, a Russian who understood physics enough and understood the subject matter enough, quite elderly. And he put it in perspective because, again, running a lot of these models, particularly through AI, they would say this is theoretical, that's theoretical, yes, it's correct, but it's theoretical. And he offered a different perspective. He said, well, it's theoretical according to what we know of physics. It's theoretical according to the physics of our planet. But if this is built someplace that has a different gravitational pull and things like, then it, the math works. And as we started approaching it that way, again, it just fully validated everything within that context, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the great unknown, depending on the circumstances of the crash. There's no indication of damage. There's no indication of it being in pieces.
The paranormal moments of 2025.
Into the paranormal.
The Pentagon says the government once had a plan to reverse engineer any recovered UFOs.
The United States is trying to back-engineer this technology, this alien technology, in secret facilities.
I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program.
There's UFO materials being studied at Bigelow Aerospace in Las Vegas, among other places.
I don't think they're anywhere near understanding completely how these things operate.
There's something about these materials that we could not have created.
And on the paranormal moments of 2025, here's Dr. Gregory Rogers.
I had gone to inspect several sites at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Even though the Air Force owned the entire station, we had contractors who would perform certain duties. Now, people who know are going to know who this is when I say it. But the primary contractor that I dealt with for medical and inspection purposes was EG&G. They're a well-known government contractor to the Department of Defense. And so on this day, I'd made an appointment with an EG&G escort, and he was going to show me 3 places where there were some new aspects of preparation. So he was going to let me see what they were so I would be familiar with it. I went to the first and second building and everything seemed totally normal. I went to the third building and I had to go into a clean room area. So I had to put a cap on my head, a lab coat on and gloves on, and then these non-electrostatic booties before I could go into the clean room. So I went in, saw the new processes. I said, okay, that looks great. And so my escort and I left the clean room. And when we went into the intermediate room, that was where I had to take my little cap off, take off my lab coat, my gloves, and my electrostatic booties. Well, because this was the last place we were going, my escort did this faster than I did because did it all the time. And so just as I was finishing doffing the equipment that I'd worn, he said, "Okay, Doc, see you later." And boom, off he went. So maybe 1 minute later, I got through, hung up my stuff, and exited through these double doors. As I did so, I was alone, and there was a major who was standing over to my right next to this small little office area. And as I went by, he smiled and waved to me and came up to me and said, "Hey, Doc, I've got something to show you." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" And he said, "I've got something even you have never seen." Now, the reason I think he said that was most areas on Cape Canaveral were compartmentalized security. So if you worked in these three buildings, the only place you could go on Cape Canaveral was those three buildings. But then there were lots of other buildings. Well, because I had to oversee so much of what was going on, I could actually go to about 80% of the buildings. There were still some buildings that were too classified for me to even go in. But I went to probably 80% of the various buildings on Cape Canaveral. And so I had badges for each security area. So as I was walking along, I had this little necklace with all of these security badges on. So he said, "I've got something to show you. Come here." So I didn't know what was going on. So I stepped into the small little office that was there. The office was not very deep, but it was wide enough for 4 separate computer console regions. So he went over to, I believe it was the third computer setup, and he sat down, and as he was talking to me, I was just standing there wondering, okay, what's he going to show me? Well, when he went into the room, he shut the door and locked it. He closed the louvers on the windows on the door and also along the hallway. So I thought, that's pretty strange. When he finally pulled up his computer and console, there was an image there. So he said, "Here it is." And so he scooted one chair to his left and allowed me to sit at his computer station. When I looked at the computer, I was very surprised, to say the least. It looked like a typical military flight hangar. There were a couple of guys on the left side that looked like engineers in lab coats, dressed pretty much like I had just been in the clean bay that I had been in. And then on the right side, it looked like 3 guys that were in Tyvek suits. But in between them was a saucer-shaped disc. And it was just reclining on the floor. It wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there. I looked at him and said, "Where did we get this from? Who made it?" And he said, "Well, I can't tell you that." And I said, "Well, why did we make it? Why would we make a craft looking like this?" Well, he made a sort of fist with his hand, with his thumb sticking up. And he pointed up to the sky several times and said, "We got it from them." So I said, "Oh my goodness." Well, I looked at the screen. There were no classification markings, no identification of the location, the date, or the time of filming. So the screen was completely clean, and I'm just looking at this thing. Well, sound went off, and the people cleared out, and then within a couple of minutes, there were some electrostatic discharges that began to occur surrounding this vehicle. Now, it was about 20 foot wide. it looked like a modified egg.
Stick with us for more Paranormal Moments of 2025 on Into the Paranormal.
This is Paranormal News. Video has just been released of what appears to be another encounter that the U.S. military had with a tic-tac-shaped UFO. The video is from the USS Jackson, a U.S. Navy destroyer, in February 2023 off the coast of San Diego, California. Naval officers encountered 4 unidentified objects that performed synchronized maneuvers, with 2 emerging from the ocean before disappearing from radar. At least one exhibited transmedium capabilities by transitioning seamlessly from underwater to the air without visible propulsion or exhaust. This encounter happened in the same area of the Pacific Ocean where other sailors have reported similar incidents, including the 2004 tic-tac encounter involving the USS Nimitz that has become widely known within the UFO community. I'm George Henry, Paranormal News.
Tragedy at a stop on the nationwide tour of the supposedly possessed Annabelle doll.
The paranormal community is remembering Dan Rivera. The ghost hunter and paranormal investigator died over the weekend while on tour with the infamous Annabelle doll.
There's a spirit of death involved around this doll. Other people have died around this doll.
Decades of lore surrounding Annabelle, causing a social media craze among those fascinated by the paranormal.
There's no such thing as Annabelle, and there never was.
There's no one rocking in the chair with Annabelle.
Annabelle did not escape. I'd be concerned if Annabelle really did leave, because she's nothing to play with.
The Paranormal Moments of 2025. Fiona Dodwell.
You know, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show with Annabelle, for instance, her legend and everything that's grown around her has been in the public consciousness since the 70s now. So, you know, it's quite a common thing. You can mention Annabelle and people will automatically know who you're referring to, and you have that imagery and the dark things that have happened around her. Without needing to say much else but the name. And then Robert the doll is quite similar. There's some very famous cases like this. And in modern times, Peggy the doll, who's now at Zach Bagans Museum, and Harold the doll. You know, these have become quite entrenched in popular culture now. And, you know, they're quite well known all over the world. So even the names themselves, fully loaded, kind of have a huge association for people.
So the story of Annabelle, where does it begin?
So it traces right back to the 70s when a young student was gifted the doll from her mum. And as the legend goes, Donna owned this doll for some time in her apartment, and it wasn't too long before she noticed some weird things happening. So she noticed things like the doll would be found in places that she hadn't left it, that it would be moved around different positions. She started to find handwritten notes that were written in an eerie childlike scrawl around the place where she lived. And then it began to affect visitors, like her friend's boyfriend came over, and apparently he experienced nightmares and woke with scratches. And it wasn't long before they made that association that there was something with the doll itself. And as I'm sure most of your listeners know, that it wasn't, Ed and Lorraine Warren, wasn't too long before they became involved. And they said that there was an energy attached to Annabelle, and that it was something demonic and negative, and that it was really trying to eventually find a way to possess the owner. So eventually they took the doll to their museum, where it resided for many years, and ever since then we've had all sorts. So, we've had the documentaries and the movie franchise and books, and obviously, as recent headlines have shown us, she's still making a bit of a dramatic splash in the world. So she's definitely one of the more well-known cases, and one that still frightens a lot of people, and I can see why.
So did the doll take on a different image in people's minds over the years, particularly in appearance?
I think so, and I think that the film itself, which really brought the story kind of to a new audience, they used a whole different imagery for Annabelle as well. I mean, as I'm sure you know, that the original Annabelle doll is a cute little Raggedy Ann doll,
Sure.
and the film used like quite a dark, demonic, ugly-looking doll. And, I think the film wanted to play into sort of the horror imagery. But actually, the doll itself was quite a cute-looking thing. And if anything, I was thinking about this recently, if anything, I think that when you see something like a little vintage doll that's quite pretty and dainty, or kind of very childlike, that's actually more eerie than what Hollywood tries to portray, I think, honestly. They try and use the more obvious things to kind of make something look scary. But Annabelle herself was a Raggedy Ann doll, and I think that her image has certainly transformed along with Hollywood's adaptation of her story. But the core truth of, well, if you believe in her, I have to say truth, there's your perception and whether you believe in these things or not, but the core story of her legend and what's happened around her has remained the same. It's found a way to evolve through three adaptations of film.
This was designed in the early 1900s, this particular Raggedy Ann doll, which later became Annabelle, right?
Yes, it was. It goes back many years, and the gentleman who actually came up with her design had a daughter, and she found the doll, or a Raggedy Ann type doll, in the family home attic, and she loved it so much, and her dad really thought that this was something that could prove to be a popular toy in general, for a public market. So he patented the design, and he came up with the idea of mass producing this Raggedy Ann doll, and that's exactly what happened. And they became quite popular for children. But the sad truth is that there were reports that his daughter passed away from an illness when she was quite young. So there was already quite a sad link to the Annabelle story, and going back to that kind of the roots of that story.
Marcella, I believe, was her name. And do we know how long after they had the doll in their possession she passed?
Unfortunately, it's not something I know, because I've read various different things. It's hard to ascertain which is true. So I know that she was supposed to have been young. She was supposed to have still been a child when it happened, but I don't know how in close proximity that was.
But she died in her early teens.
Yes, she was quite young. I think maybe 13 or something. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to, as I'm sure you can go online and see various accounts. So it's really hard to get to the root facts of the story. But
do we know where even the faceless doll that Marcella found in the attic came from?
No, and that's quite unusual, isn't it? Because that almost adds to the mystery of the story, especially when this is, brings us back to the origins of the Raggedy Ann and then Annabelle and her story and everything. So that's something that was never, as far as I could find anyway, reported on where that doll came from or what that doll was, who it belonged to or anything. So that's not something that I've been able to confirm what that was.
Just imagine, though, the grief of the father and maybe, responsibility he may have felt by allowing his daughter to possess the doll. What did his life become after his daughter's passing?
The thing is, I think because we have to remember that the doll that his daughter had was way before any of the legend to do with Annabelle that we know of today. Mm-hmm. So it's more just that the reason I mentioned that in the book was more just because it was something I wanted to research about the origins of how the Raggedy Ann dolls came about in general. So his daughter, I think it was just a sad coincidence that she had become ill, and that it happened to be her father happened to be the person that was bringing the Raggedy Ann doll to popular production. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily that there was a direct link in that sense. It's just something that I felt worthy mentioning because of the connection. I'm not sure exactly what her circumstances were when she died, other than that there was reports that she possibly had like a flu or some kind of
diphtheria
illness like that. That was definitely mentioned. So it was something like that, and that must have been very sad. Sure. For him to lose her at such a young age.
But the father, from my understanding, kept the doll around afterwards as kind of a to help him grieve over the loss of his daughter.
Yeah, this is something I've come across too, and in my research, that he kept the doll. So maybe because he knew how special it had been to her, that was something that he kept. Right. But it was just part of the sad history of the beginning of the doll itself.
Next, our final paranormal moment of 2025.
Atlas was discovered on July 1st by the NASA-funded Atlas survey. It was discovered using their telescope.
It is only the third time we have detected an object that has come from beyond our solar system.
We know that it's relatively big compared to the other two.
It's now officially confirmed that not only is this an object from outside of the solar system, it also is potentially the oldest comet ever observed.
This object was moving too fast for something that would normally be bound to our solar system.
The newly discovered space traveler is turning heads across the astronomical world.
The paranormal moments of 2025 lead us to Professor Avi Loeb.
Basically because the survey telescopes that can detect them were only available over the past decade. And it started with the Pan-STARRS Observatory in Hawaii that was constructed as a result of a directive from the U.S. Congress to NASA to search for all objects bigger than the size of a football field, about 140 meters or so, that may impact the Earth, that come close to Earth. And so that was the beginning of the search for such objects. And in the process of looking for near-Earth objects, Pan-STARRS discovered in 2017 a near-Earth object that was moving too fast to be bound to the sun. It was given the name Oumuamua, which means a scout in the Hawaiian language. And prior to that, we just didn't have the facility to detect such objects. We expect lots of them. So an object the size of Oumuamua, which was of the order of 100 meters in size, at least in length, we don't know how thin it was. Those arrive every year through the region within the orbit of the Earth around the sun. Moreover, if you imagine smaller objects, existing, we might have, 1 million objects that are the size of a person or so within the orbit of the Earth around the sun at this point in time. We just can't see them because they reflect very little sunlight. And the reason we have this detection of Oumuamua is because it was big enough to reflect sufficient amount of sunlight for our telescope, the Pan-STARRS telescope, to find it. Then it took a couple of years before we found the second one. It was an amateur astronomer that discovered it. That one was easier to detect because it was a comet, meaning that it produced a glow of gas and dust around it because it evaporated as it came close to the sun. We discovered it when it was about 2.5 times the Earth-Sun separation. So comets are easier to detect. Its size was actually the core size, the nucleus of that comet was probably about 400, 500 meters in diameter. We don't know exactly, but the plume of gas and dust was much bigger, reflected enough sunlight to be detectable easily. And then just now, on July 1st, 2025, a few weeks ago, the third object was discovered. It was discovered at a distance of 4.5 times the Earth-Sun separation. There is a little bit of fuzz around it. It's a bit more extended than the image of a star in the background. So some people argue with a lot of confidence that it must be a comet. We have to wait another month or so before it comes close enough to the sun so that it will be beyond any reasonable doubt that it has a huge cometary tail if it gets warmed up by the sun and the icy surface evaporates. But as of now, it's the existence of a coma is sort of marginal. I actually wrote a paper shortly after it was discovered because the claim was that based on the flux, it's very bright. And therefore, if it was a rock, it had to be 20 kilometers in diameter, which is huge, twice as large as the rock that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. And I calculated that it makes no sense to have such a big rock because we found it after 5 years of survey with the Atlas telescope, a 0.5 meter telescope that surveyed the sky from Chile. That means that, if it's a giant rock, not only should we have found of the order of 1 million Oumuamua-like objects before we find one object that is 20 kilometers in size, simply because it's so much bigger, but also the amount of mass that need to be supplied from interstellar space exceeds all reasonable estimates of how many rocks, how much mass in rocks there is per unit volume in interstellar space. So I argue that, the simplest solution would be it's a comet with a small nucleus, less than 1 kilometer in size, not very different from Borisov, maybe a factor of a few bigger, but not much bigger than that. And then there is no issue with the mass because it's a small object surrounded by a plume of dust that reflects sunlight, and that's why we see it as bright as we do. But it yet remains to be seen that there is indeed a cloud around it. And moreover, when people took a spectrum of this object, it's called 3I Atlas because the Atlas telescope found it, the survey of that telescope.
Sure.
And by the way, it was a 0.5 meter telescope where just next to the Rubin Observatory that was inaugurated in June 2025. And so this small telescope scooped the Rubin Observatory. It's just their neighbors in Chile. But the Rubin telescope found data on this object that preceded the discovery date with the Atlas telescope. So there was a very nice paper by the Rubin team providing the image of this object and additional data on its trajectory. So altogether, if I had to bet, I would say it's probably a comet. And what we see is the reflection of sunlight from a cloud of dust around a very compact nucleus. But we haven't resolved yet the nucleus. We haven't seen the cloud of dust clearly. So as a result, I was willing to consider that it's something else, and we can talk about it more.
Sure. But do you suspect that we will find more of these interstellar objects over time?
Oh, definitely. So the Rubin Observatory, that, by the way, was constructed, it's about $800 million cost, and that cost was paid by the National Science Foundation in collaboration with the Department of Energy. And the main goal of that observatory is to find what the Pan-STARRS observatory could not. So complete the task of Pan-STARRS and perhaps get to find most of the objects bigger than 140 meters in diameter.
And those are the paranormal moments of 2025. We'll make more together with you in 2026, God willing. And if you missed any of these shows, you want to hear the entire episodes, find them free. It's our gift to you on all of the podcast apps. From the cold, dark depths of a secret dungeon somewhere deep in the remote Pacific Northwest, good night, and God bless.